I'm Jane Ellis, 28, a seamstress with dreams buried in sketchbooks, scraping by in Brooklyn to pay my mother's medical bills. My stepsister Claire and her friends, Margot and Elise, have mocked me for years. She has bullied me for years, her cruelty following me to Atelier Vivian, the company we both happen to work at. Just my luck, there she and her friends relentlessly make my life miserable. At a grand wedding, they humiliated me, laughing at my dress, my shoes, tearing me apart in front of everyone. But that day, my whole life changed, and they had to watch my victory. This is my story of rising from their shadows to claim my light. Before we dive into today's story, we would like to thank you for joining us on Tidal Afterglow. Your support means the world, so please like, share, and subscribe to stay updated with our gripping tales of justice and triumph. Now, let's jump into the story. The envelope lay on my kitchen table like a challenge, its cream surface gleaming against the chipped formica, a stranger in my world of frayed edges and half-paid bills. Gold embossing traced the words, "Annalise Montgomery and Gregory Stone request the honor of your presence at their marriage." I stared at it, my fingers trembling, afraid to touch. It wasn't just paper. It was a summons to a world I'd never belonged in, a world of wealth and glamour that felt as distant as the dreams I'd buried long ago. My name is Jane Ellis, and at 28, I'm a dreamer who's learned to keep her dreams small. I'm a seamstress at Atelier Vivian, a high-end fashion house in Manhattan where I spend my days hunched over patterns, my fingers calloused from needles and thread. My Brooklyn apartment is a testament to my life's limits: peeling wallpaper, a faucet that drips no matter how I wrestle with it, a mattress that groans with every shift. My wardrobe is thrift store finds, my ambitions tucked away in sketchbooks I haven't opened in years. But this invitation? It's a crack in the wall I've built around myself, letting in a light I'm not sure I can bear. I sank into my chair, the wood creaking under my weight, and traced the gold lettering with my fingertip. Annalise Montgomery. The name conjured images of red carpets, private jets, a life I could only sketch in my mind. We'd met 7 years ago at Parsons School of Design, where I was the scholarship kid from Ohio, my sweaters patched at the elbows, my shoes worn thin from walking New York streets. Annalise was the heiress who floated through campus like a vision, her designer bags and silk scarves a silent declaration of her place in the world. She'd been kind in her aloof way, lending me her notes once after I missed a class for a diner shift, pausing another time to admire a sketch I'd left on a studio table, her green eyes bright with curiosity. "This is beautiful, Jane," she'd said, her voice soft but sincere. I'd blushed, mumbling thanks, and she'd smiled before drifting away, her world untouchable. We weren't friends. Not really. So, why was I invited to her wedding? The answer lay in a secret I'd carried for 6 months. I designed her wedding gown. Not Vivian, the Atelier's namesake, nor the senior designers who strutted around like royalty, but me. Plain Jane, as my colleagues called me behind my back, their whispers sharp as pins. Annalise had approached me directly, bypassing the Atelier's hierarchy, meeting me in a tucked-away cafe in the East Village. "I saw your work at the student showcase," she'd said, her auburn hair catching the cafe's dim light, her voice low and urgent. "No one else can do this. I want you." I'd been flattered, then terrified. This wasn't just any wedding. Annalise's marriage to Gregory Stone, a tech billionaire whose name graced Forbes lists, was the event of the season, splashed across Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and every gossip blog from New York to Paris. She could afford gowns from Chanel, Dior, Valentino. Yet she chose me. The gown had to be perfect, and it was sleeveless, with a plunging neckline softened by hand-embroidered lace that cascaded like a waterfall. The silk was Italian, buttery and luminous, draping like liquid moonlight. The pearls, hand-picked from Japan, glowed like tiny moons, each one sewn with care during sleepless nights in my apartment. Every bead, every stitch, was mine, crafted in secret while my colleagues thought I was mending hems or altering patterns. Annalise had insisted on secrecy, her smile both playful and determined. "The reveal will be worth it. I didn't know what she meant, but her words stuck with me, a promise and a threat. Now, staring at the invitation, I felt the weight of that promise. The wedding was tomorrow in the Hamptons, a place I'd only seen in glossy magazines, where mansions rose like palaces and the air smelled of salt and money. I wasn't sure I could go. I wasn't sure I could stay away. My gaze drifted to my closet, where my only formal dress hung, a simple black gown I'd sewn myself from discounted fabric. It was elegant in its simplicity, with clean lines and a modest hem, but next to the couture I'd see tomorrow, it would look like a rag. And my shoes, God, my shoes. Dollar store heels, faux leather, scuffed at the toes. I'd bought them in a panic when my old pair broke, spending $9 because it was all I could spare. My mother's medical bills ate most of my paycheck, her cancer treatments a constant drain that left me with nothing for luxuries like proper shoes. Mom was my anchor, my reason for pushing through. I'd sat by her hospital bed last month, her frail hands clutching mine, her voice weak but hopeful. "You're meant for big things, Jane," she'd said, her eyes bright despite the sterile lights. I wanted to believe her, but big things didn't happen to girls like me. Girls from nowhere towns, with nowhere dreams. Yet Annalise's voice echoed in my mind. She'd called last week, her tone soft through the phone's static. "Jane, you have to come. It's your moment, too." I didn't know what she meant, but the sincerity in her voice stirred something in me. Hope, maybe, or dread. The past pressed against me, heavy and unyielding. I hadn't always been this invisible. As a child in our small Ohio town, I dreamed of dresses I'd never own, sketching gowns in notebooks, while Mom taught me to sew on her old Singer machine. She'd raised me alone after my father left when I was 5, abandoning us for our neighbor, Margaret Wentworth, and her daughter, Claire. He didn't just leave. He erased us, moving into Margaret's house across the street, where Claire's smug grin became a daily torment. They were a new family, picture perfect, while Mom and I were the cast-offs, the ones they mocked. Claire was my stepsister, though the word felt like a lie. She was never family, only a source of pain. She'd steal my sketches, tear them up in front of her friends, laughing as I scrambled to pick up the pieces. Margaret would watch, her lips curled in a sneer, calling me, that girl, as if I were a stray dog. My father, the man I'd once idolized, turned cold, his eyes avoiding mine when I passed their house. Their bullying was relentless, Claire spilling juice on my clothes by accident, Margaret whispering loud enough for the neighborhood to hear that Mom was too weak to raise a proper daughter. By the time I was 10, their cruelty had driven us out, Mom and I moving to a cramped apartment in another town, her health already failing. The worst came when I was 16. Mom's cancer had worsened, the treatments draining our savings. I swallowed my pride and went to my father, trembling on their doorstep, begging for help. Claire opened the door, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Look who's crawling back," she sneered, as Margaret laughed from inside. My father barely looked at me, muttering, "We don't have money for your problems." Claire shoved me out, slamming the door in my face. That day, something in me broke, but something else sparked. I vowed to rise above their cruelty, to build a life for Mom and me. Now, Claire was at Atelier Vivian, my stepsister turned workmate, her venom sharper than ever. She led the design team, her emerald eyes and sharp cheekbones a mask for the same cruelty I'd known as a child. She'd undermine my work, forget to include me in meetings, spread rumors that I was incompetent. Her allies, Margot Hale and Elise Carver, followed her lead, their whispers echoing the taunts of my childhood. Plain Jane, the nobody, the help. I opened my desk drawer, tucking the invitation next to a stack of unpaid bills, and pulled out my sketchbook. The pages were filled with designs I'd never shown anyone, gowns that flowed like rivers, suits sharp as blades, dreams I'd stitched into paper but never dared to bring to life. I flipped to the sketch of Annalise's gown, the lines bold and confident, a vision I'd somehow made real. I'd spent months on it, sketching in my apartment's dim light, stitching until my fingers bled, waking from dreams of lace and silk to find my hands still moving. If I could do that, maybe I could face tomorrow. I packed my duffel bag, patched and fraying from years of use. The black dress, the dollar store shoes, a toothbrush, and the sketchbook I couldn't bear to leave behind. I set my alarm for dawn, the train to the Hamptons leaving early. As I lay in bed, the city's hum filtering through my window, I felt the weight of the unknown pressing against me. The next morning, I dragged myself out of bed, the sky still dark, and made my way to Penn Station. The train ride was a blur of green fields and nervous anticipation. My duffel sat at my feet, a stark contrast to the sleek leather totes of the other passengers, their perfume and cologne heavy in the air. I wore jeans and a faded blouse, saving the black dress for the wedding, but I felt their eyes on me, judging my worn sneakers, my unpolished nails. My reflection in the train window showed a pale face, brown hair pulled into a tight bun, and eyes that looked more tired than hopeful. At Atelier Vivian, the week before, Claire had cornered me in the workroom, her voice dripping with disdain. "I heard you got an invitation to Annalise's wedding," she'd said, her lips curling into a smirk. "Must be a mistake. You're not exactly on her level, are you?" Margot had laughed, her crimson nails tapping the table, while Elise's eyes flicked away, her smile tight but cruel. I'd mumbled something about being invited, my cheeks burning, and Claire had leaned in, her perfume cloying. "Don't embarrass yourself, Jane. You'll never belong there." Her words echoed now, a drumbeat of doubt as the train sped toward the Hamptons. I thought of Mom, resting in her hospital bed, her voice weak but steady. "Go, Jane," she'd said when I told her about the invitation. "Show them who you are." I clung to that, even as fear gnawed at me. What if Claire was right? What if I was just a fraud, a seamstress playing dress-up in a world that would never accept me? The shuttle dropped me off at the Montgomery estate, and I nearly turned back. The mansion was a palace of white stone and glass, its driveway lined with Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, and a cherry-red Ferrari that gleamed like a jewel. Guests glided past in gowns that cost more than my yearly rent, their laughter light and careless. I clutched my duffel, my jeans sticking to my legs in the June heat, and forced myself to walk toward the entrance. The foyer was blinding. Marble floors stretched endlessly, chandeliers dripped crystals like frozen rain, and floral arrangements towered over me, their scent of roses and lilies overwhelming. A valet glanced at my bag, his eyebrow twitching, but he said nothing, pointing me toward a guest check-in table. I gave my name, half expecting them to say it was a mistake, but the attendant, a young woman in a crisp black uniform, smiled and handed me a program embossed with gold. "Miss Ellis, you're at table 12, she said, her voice polished. "Enjoy the evening." I nodded, my throat dry, and stepped into the crowd, my duffel slung over my shoulder. The air buzzed with chatter, the clink of champagne flutes, the rustle of silk. I'd changed into my black dress in a train station bathroom, the dollar store shoes pinching my toes, but I felt exposed, like a child playing dress-up. I scanned the room, searching for a corner to hide in, when a voice stopped me cold. "Jane? Is that you?" My heart sank. Claire Wentworth, my stepsister, stood near a champagne tower, her emerald green gown hugging her like a second skin, her sharp cheekbones catching the light. Margot and Elise flanked her, their smiles predatory as they sauntered toward me. The past and present collided, and I braced myself for the storm I knew was coming. The foyer's marble floor stretched before me like a frozen ocean, its sheen catching the light of chandeliers that dripped crystals above my head like tears of glass. I stood rooted, my duffel bag heavy on my shoulder, the black dress I'd sewn clinging to my skin in the June heat. The air buzzed with laughter, the clink of champagne flutes, the rustle of silk and satin as guests glided past, their gowns a parade of wealth I could only sketch in dreams. Jane Ellis, felt like a smudge on this glittering canvas, my dollar store shoes scuffing the floor with every hesitant step. Claire's voice still echoed in my ears. "Jane? Is that you?" Sharp and syrupy, laced with the same malice I'd wielded since we were children. My stepsister, now my workmate, stood near the champagne tower, her emerald green gown shimmering like a viper's skin, her sharp cheekbones cutting through the crowd's haze. Margot Hale and Elise Carver, her shadows at Atelier Vivian, flanked her, their smiles predatory, their eyes raked over me like I was prey. I'd braced myself for this, but the weight of their gaze, amplified by the elite of New York watching, pressed against my chest, stealing my breath. "Darling, what are you doing here?" Claire asked, her voice loud enough to turn heads, her mock surprise a blade aimed at my heart. "Did you sneak in with the catering staff?" The crowd tittered, a soft ripple of laughter that felt like a slap. My throat tightened, my fingers clutching the strap of my duffel like a lifeline. Margot, in a crimson gown that matched her painted lips, snorted, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Invited? In that? Oh, Jane, you're adorable." Elise, the youngest, her lavender gown understated but still couture, let her gaze drop to my feet. Her laugh was sharp, piercing, cutting through the chatter. "Are those dollar store shoes? Oh my God, she's wearing dollar store shoes to Annalise Montgomery's wedding." The laughter swelled, a chorus of condescension that echoed off the chandeliers. My shoes, scuffed and cheap, felt like anchors dragging me into the marble floor. I wanted to run, to disappear, to melt into the ground and never be seen again. My dress, which I'd spent hours sewing, felt like a costume, exposing me as a fraud. The crowd's eyes were on me, their smiles sharp, their whispers cutting. I opened my mouth to respond, to defend myself, but nothing came out. What could I say? They were right. I didn't belong here. Claire stepped closer, her perfume cloying, her smile triumphant. "Come on, Jane, tell us. Are you here to clean the tables? Fold the napkins? You're so good at the grunt work." The crowd laughed again, the sound of a knife twisting in my chest. Margot leaned in, her voice a mock whisper that carried to the nearby tables. "Maybe she's here to fix someone's hem. Those shoes scream seamstress, don't they?" Elise giggled, covering her mouth, but her eyes were cold. "I bet she made that dress herself. Is it polyester?" So quaint. My vision blurred, tears pricking my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. The foyer felt like a crucible, the laughter burning me alive. I'd heard these taunts before, in the atelier's workroom, whispered behind my back as I bent over patterns. Plain Jane. The help. The nobody. But here, in this glittering foyer, with the elite of New York watching, it was a public execution. My shoes, scuffed and cheap, felt like lead weights. My dress, which I'd sewn with care, felt like a lie. I was exposed, a fraud in a world that valued wealth and status above all else. Memories of Claire's cruelty flooded back, unbidden, sharpening the pain. I was 10 again, standing in our old Ohio neighborhood, Claire tearing my sketches in front of her friends, her laughter ringing as I scrambled to pick up the pieces. "You think you're an artist?" she'd mocked, her emerald eyes gleaming. "You're nothing, Jane." Margaret, her mother, had watched from their porch, her sneer a mirror of Claire's, while my father, our father, stood silent, his back turned. That was the day I'd learned to hide my dreams, to shrink myself to avoid their venom. And now, years later, in this palace of marble and crystal, Claire was still tearing me apart, piece by piece. "Ladies," a voice interrupted, smooth and commanding. Evelyn Montgomery, Annalise's mother, stood before us, resplendent in a silver gown that shimmered like moonlight. "Is there a problem?" Claire's smile didn't waver, but her eyes flicked to Evelyn with a hint of unease. "Oh, no problem, Mrs. Montgomery. Just catching up with our colleague, Jane." Evelyn's gaze settled on me, softening for a moment. "Jane, dear, you look lovely. Come, let me show you to your seat." She guided me away, her hand gentle on my arm, and I could feel Claire's glare burning into my back. The crowd's laughter faded, but the humiliation lingered, a weight I couldn't shake. Evelyn led me through the foyer, past tables laden with crystal and flowers, to a seat at the edge of the room, far from Claire and her cronies. "Don't mind them," she said quietly, her voice warm. "You're a special guest today." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak, and sank into my chair. My hands trembled in my lap, my dollar store shoes hidden beneath the tablecloth. I didn't know what Evelyn meant, but her words echoed Annalise's. It's your moment, too. I clung to that, even as doubt gnawed at me. What moment? What could I, Jane Ellis, possibly have to offer a world like this? The ceremony was held in a garden that looked like it had been plucked from a fairy tale. Roses and peonies bloomed in riots of pink, white, and crimson, their petals trembling in the salty breeze from the nearby ocean. A string quartet played Vivaldi, the notes floating like gossamer threads, weaving through the air. Guests sat on white chairs draped with silk, their faces glowing with anticipation under a canopy of white silk that fluttered overhead, catching the golden light of the late afternoon. I sat in the back row, grateful for the obscurity, my black dress clinging to my skin in the heat, the fabric damp with sweat and nerves. I tried to lose myself in the beauty, the golden light filtering through ancient oaks, the scent of flowers mingling with sea air, the soft rustle of silk as guests shifted in their seats. But my mind kept replaying Claire's words, Elise's laugh, Margot's smirk. Dollar store shoes. The phrase burned, a brand on my confidence, searing deeper with every memory of their laughter. I glanced down, tucking my feet further under my chair, as if hiding them could erase the shame. My hands twisted in my lap, the calluses on my fingers a reminder of the work I'd poured into Annalise's gown, work no one knew about, work that might never be known. The music shifted, a soft swell of strings, and Annalise appeared at the end of the aisle. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to still the world. She stood framed by the garden's arch, her gown a vision of light and shadow. The silk flowed like liquid moonlight, catching the sun in a way that made it seem alive, rippling with every breath of the breeze. The lace, hand-embroidered with patterns I'd spent weeks perfecting, cascaded down the bodice and train, delicate yet commanding, its intricate swirls a map of my sleepless nights. Pearls glowed against the fabric, each one sewn by my aching hands, their luster a quiet testament to the hours I'd spent hunched over my kitchen table, my fingers bleeding from the needle's bite. The neckline plunged just enough, softened by lace that framed her like a halo. The train stretched behind her, a river of silk that shimmered with every step, pooling on the grass like a dream. She was radiant, her smile bright, her eyes shimmering with joy. But it was the gown that stole the show. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Who designed it? It's divine. I've never seen anything like it. And my heart swelled, even as it ached. I'd pride in my work, but the secrecy of it gnawed at me. Claire's voice echoed in my mind, sharp and mocking. You're nothing, Jane. I'd spent months on that gown, sketching in my tiny apartment, stitching until dawn, waking from dreams of lace and silk to find my hands still moving. It was my soul-made fabric, my heart woven into every seam. And no one knew. I watched her glide down the aisle, her steps graceful, my gown moving with her like a second skin. Gregory waited at the station, his tuxedo sharp, his smile wide and genuine. The officiant spoke of commitment and eternity, his voice a soft counterpoint to the quartet. They exchanged vows, their words thick with emotion, and I felt a pang. Not for their love, but for their certainty, their place in this glittering world. The ceremony blurred past, Gregory promising forever, and Annalise echoing with a tearful smile. The crowd cheered as they kissed, a wave of joy that carried me along, but I clapped with trembling hands, my chest tight with pride and fear. What if they found out it was me? What if they didn't? As guests moved toward the reception, I lingered, watching Annalise and Gregory pose for photos under the canopy, the gown catching the fading sunlight. She caught my eye and smiled, a small, knowing smile that sent my stomach flipping. Did she mean it? Was this really my moment, too? I followed her to the crowd, my duffel bag heavy with every step, my shoes pinching my toes. The ballroom was a spectacle of opulence, tables draped in ivory silk, each centerpiece a tower of orchids, roses, and crystal that sparkled under chandeliers the size of small cars. Waiters circulated with trays of caviar, smoked salmon, and champagne flutes that fizzed like stars. A jazz band played Ella Fitzgerald, the music weaving through the laughter and clinking glasses, a sultry backdrop to the evening's glamour. I found my seat at table 12, far from the center of the room, and picked at a plate of salmon I couldn't taste, my eyes darting to Claire, Margot, and Elise across the ballroom. They were holding court near the dance floor, surrounded by fashion editors, influencers, and a few designers whose names I recognized from magazines. Claire's laugh was loud, her gestures animated, as if she were the star of the evening, her emerald gown shimmering with every move. Margot leaned in, whispering something that made the group chuckle, her crimson lips curled in a smirk. Elise stood slightly apart, her smile tight, but she nodded along, ever the follower, her lavender gown catching the light. They hadn't seen me yet, but I felt their presence like a storm cloud, heavy with the promise of rain. The speeches began, Gregory standing to speak of love and destiny, his hand resting on Annalise's. Her father, a silver-haired tycoon, talked of legacy and pride, his eyes glistening. But my mind drifted to my shoes, my dress, the way Claire's eyes had raked over me like I was nothing. I wondered how long I could endure this, how long I could sit in this glittering cage before it broke me. Then came the announcement that the bride, groom, and bridal team would return shortly, and my heart sank. I knew what it meant. Annalise was changing out of the gown, my gown, the one I'd poured my soul into. She's going to wear her bridal changing dress. Tears pricked my eyes, blurring the ballroom's sparkle. What had I expected? That she'd wear it all night, that my work would be celebrated? I was a fool, a hopeless dreamer, just as Claire had always said. I needed to leave, to escape this world that had never wanted me. I grabbed my duffel bag and stood, my vision hazy, my legs unsteady. I wasn't watching where I was going, and I collided with a waitress, a loud crash shattering the air. Wine glasses hit the marble floor, splintering into shards, red wine pooling like blood against the white stone. Guests gasped, their eyes turning to me, the waitress glaring as she steadied herself. "I'm so sorry," I stammered, my voice cracking, my face burning with shame. I bent to pick up the glass, my hands trembling, desperate to fix something, anything. Then I heard it, the laughter I knew too well, sharp and calculated, cutting through the crowd's murmurs. Claire's heels clicked against the marble, deliberate and predatory, Margot and Elise trailing her like wolves. I stood slowly, bracing myself, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Well, look at this," Claire said, her voice loud enough to silence the room, her emerald eyes gleaming with triumph. "Jane Ellis, causing a scene, as usual. Tell me, did you sneak in disguised as a server? Because that would make sense, given how you look." The crowd laughed, a wave of mockery that crashed over me. My knees buckled, my throat clogged with tears I couldn't shed. Margot stepped forward, her crimson gown swirling, her smirk sharp as a blade. "Let's be real, Jane. We work at Atelier Vivian, just like you. Well, unlike you, we were formally invited. We designed the dresses for the entire bridal team, including Annalise's changing gown, under Vivian's direction. That's why we're here. But you..." She paused, her eyes raking over my dress, my shoes, my duffel. "Why are you here?" Elise chimed in, her lavender gown swaying as she tilted her head, her voice dripping with false pity. "Actually, ladies, let's clarify something. Annalise was very specific. She didn't want Jane anywhere near her designs. She had Jane suspended from the atelier for 7 months, just to avoid seeing her face. If she went to those lengths, she must loathe her. So, Jane, tell us, how are you even here? Did you forge an invitation?" The laughter grew louder, a chorus of cruelty that echoed off the walls. My legs felt like water, my vision swimming. I wanted to scream, to tell them the truth, that I designed Annalise's gown, that she'd chosen me, but the words stuck in my throat, choked by years of silence, of shrinking myself to survive. Claire stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming, her smile a knife. "Face it, Jane. You're nothing. You've always been nothing. Just like back in Ohio, begging at our door, crying for your pathetic mother. You don't belong here. The mention of my mother, of that day when I'd begged my father for help, broke something in me. I was 16 again, standing on their doorstep, Claire's laughter ringing as she shoved me out, Margaret's sneer burning into my back, my father's cold rejection a wound that never healed. The ballroom spun, the chandeliers blurring into stars, and I felt myself sinking, my knees giving out, the glass-strewn floor rushing up to meet me. Jane! A voice cut through the chaos, sharp and urgent. Footsteps rushed toward me, and then arms were around me, strong and steady. Annalise, still in my gown, her face pale with concern, held me upright, her green eyes searching mine. Are you okay? What happened? I could barely speak, my voice a whisper. I'm sorry. I need to leave. No, Jane, no, she said, her voice firm, her grip tightening. She turned, her gaze sweeping over Claire, Margot, and Elise, who stood frozen, their smiles faltering. Evelyn Montgomery appeared behind her, her silver gown shimmering, her voice sharp as she ordered. Someone clean this mess, now. Annalise faced the crowd, her posture regal, my gown catching the light like a beacon. Let me address your concerns, ladies, she said, her voice carrying across the ballroom, silencing the whispers. For your information, Jane was very well invited here, both verbally by my family and with a formal invitation. I specifically wanted her here. She is my guest. I looked at her, my eyes glossing with tears, my heart pounding. She squeezed my arm, her smile soft but determined, then turned back to the crowd. I had planned to save this moment, but it seemed some people couldn't wait and couldn't show respect on a day meant to be mine. Her glare pinned Claire and her allies, their faces paling. For your information, she continued, her voice rising, the reason I asked Atelier Vivian to keep Jane out of the company for 7 months was because she was working on a project far more important than your bridal team designs. I didn't want anyone disturbing her focus. Claire's smirk vanished, Margot's eyes widened, and Elise's hands fidgeted with her gown. The crowd murmured, sensing a shift. I felt a tremor of hope, but fear held me back. What was she about to say? Annalise raised her hand, and the ballroom fell silent. I have an announcement to make, she declared, her voice ringing with authority. Attendants wheeled in a golden mannequin draped in glass, and there it was, my gown. The wedding gown, displayed like a work of art. Gasps rippled through the room, cameras flashing as guests surged forward. In the background, a screen flickered to life, showing photos of Annalise and me, laughing together in my apartment, her in the gown, me adjusting the lace. I stared, shocked. We'd taken those pictures the day she picked up the dress, moments I'd thought were private, now shared with the world. Everyone has been asking who designed my wedding gown, the masterpiece you've all been raving about, Annalise said, her smile radiant. Well, here she is. Jane Ellis, the brilliant designer who brought this vision to life. I chose her because no one else could capture my dream the way she did. The room erupted in applause, gasps, and murmurs of disbelief. My heart stopped, then raced, my tears spilling over. Annalise turned to me, her eyes warm. Jane, your talent is undeniable. This gown is a testament to your brilliance, and I'm honored to wear it. She went on, praising my work, my dedication, my ability to turn sketches into reality. The crowd's attitude shifted, their earlier mockery replaced by awe. Fashion editors approached, their notebooks open, designers I'd only read about nodding in approval. I stood there, overwhelmed, my black dress and dollar store shoes forgotten, my duffel bag at my feet a relic of a life I was leaving behind. Annalise turned to Claire, Margot, and Elise, her voice steel. As for you, this is my wedding. There will be no bullying here. I'd have you escorted out, but I want you to stay and watch Jane shine. It's a happy day, and she deserves every moment of it. The trio shrank back, their faces flushed with shame, their earlier confidence shattered. Claire's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear. I didn't gloat. I was too overwhelmed, too raw, but I felt a quiet strength, a spark that had been buried for years. The rest of the evening was a whirlwind. Evelyn pulled me along, introducing me to designers, editors, and influencers who clamored to meet me. "Your gown is extraordinary," said a Vogue editor, her glasses glinting as she scribbled my name. "We need to feature you." A Parisian designer, whose work I'd studied at Parsons, clasped my hand, his accent thick with praise. "This lace, these pearls, c'est magnifique. You must come to my atelier." Guests requested photos with me beside the gown, their smiles genuine, their words a balm to the wounds Claire had reopened. I stood by the mannequin, my gown glowing under the lights, and felt a shift within me. I wasn't plain Jane anymore, not the nobody they'd mocked. I was Jane Ellis, designer, dreamer, someone who'd turned pain into art. The ballroom, once a cage, became a stage, and I stood on it, my head high, my heart full. Claire, Margot, and Elise sat in a corner, their laughter gone, their faces tight as they watched the crowd fawn over me. I didn't approach them. I didn't need to. Their silence was louder than their earlier taunts, their diminished presence of victory I hadn't sought but welcomed. As the night wound down, I found Annalise near the dance floor, her changing gown, a sleek satin piece I hadn't designed, shimmering under the lights. She hugged me, her smile warm. "Thank you, Jane," she said softly. "Not just for the gown, but for being here. You're going to soar." I thanked her, my voice thick with emotion, and she rejoined Gregory, their laughter blending with the jazz band's final notes. I picked up my duffel, my shoes still pinching, but my steps were lighter. The wedding, once a crucible of shame, had become a turning point, a moment I'd carry forever. The morning light spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new studio, painting the hardwood floors in shades of gold. I stood at my drafting table, a sketchbook open before me, my pencil dancing across the page as a gown took shape, flowing silk, bold lines, a vision I'd once tucked away in fear. My name, Jane Ellis, was no longer whispered with mockery, but spoken with reverence in the fashion world, a world I'd once thought would never see me. At 29, I was no longer plain Jane, the seamstress with dollar store shoes. I was a designer, a dreamer who'd learned to bring her dreams to life with a snap of her fingers. The past year had been a whirlwind, a blur of triumphs that felt like someone else's life. After Annalise's wedding, where my gown had stolen the show, the calls started coming, Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, WWD, all clamoring for interviews. The unknown designer who dressed Annalise Montgomery, they called me, and I'd laugh, remembering the nights I'd stitched until my fingers bled, my Brooklyn apartment lit by a single flickering bulb. Atelier Vivian promoted me to lead designer, a title I'd never dared imagine, and my sketches, those dreams I'd hidden for years, became collections worn by actresses, heiresses, and influencers on red carpets from New York to Paris. I'd moved Mom and me to a brownstone in Park Slope, a far cry from our cramped Ohio apartments and the Brooklyn walk-up with its dripping faucet. The house was warm, with high ceilings, a garden out back, and a studio where I could create without the weight of unpaid bills pressing against me. Mom's cancer was in remission, her treatments fully paid for with the hefty check Annalise had given me for the gown, plus my new salary. I'd sit with her in the evenings, her laughter filling the kitchen as she chopped vegetables for dinner, her strength returning like a flower blooming after a long winter. "I told you, Jane," she'd say, her eyes bright. "You were meant for big things. But big things don't erase the scars." I'd walk past the mirror in my studio, catching my reflection, brown hair loose now, not scraped into a tight bun, my eyes no longer tired but alive, and still feel the sting of Claire's laughter, the weight of her words. "You're nothing, Jane." My stepsister, my tormentor, was still at Atelier Vivian, working under me now, her emerald eyes avoiding mine in meetings, her once loud voice muted. Margot and Elise, her shadows, followed suit, their smirks replaced by tight smiles, their cruelty silenced by my success. I didn't gloat. I didn't have time. My days were filled with fittings, fabric swatches, and emails from clients who wanted a Jane Ellis original. But their presence was a reminder of the crucible I'd survived, the foyer where they'd torn me apart only to watch me rise. The fashion world embraced me, and I embraced it back, cautious but eager. I attended galas in gowns of my own design, their silk and lace a far cry from the polyester dress I'd worn to Annalise's wedding. At a Met Gala after-party, Anna Wintour herself complimented my work, her voice cool but sincere. "Your gown for Annalise was a revelation. Keep surprising us." I nodded, my heart racing, and later sketched a new collection inspired by that moment, each piece bold and unapologetic, like the woman I was becoming. Designers I'd idolized at Parsons, Zach Posen, Carolina Herrera, reached out, inviting me to collaborate, their emails of validation I'd never expected. My sketchbooks, once gathering dust, were now my lifeline, their pages spilling over with ideas I finally had the freedom to bring to life. I networked tirelessly, shaking hands with editors, stylists, and celebrities who sought me out. At a Fashion Week event in Manhattan, a young actress in one of my gowns, a deep indigo piece with hand-stitched constellations, hugged me, her eyes wide. "This dress makes me feel like a star," she said, and I smiled, remembering the nights I'd felt like nothing, sketching stars I thought I'd never reach. My name was out there now, a brand in its own right, and brands came calling: Gucci, Dior, even Vivienne herself, offering partnerships I politely declined. I wanted to build my own legacy, not borrow someone else's. Mom's recovery was my greatest joy. We'd walk through Prospect Park, her arm linked with mine, her step steady, her face glowing with health. She'd tell stories of her youth, of dreams she'd set aside to raise me, and I'd listen, my heart full. I'd bought her a sewing machine, a sleek new model, and she'd laugh, stitching quilts in the living room, her hands as steady as they'd been when she taught me to sew. "You got your talent from me," she'd tease, and I'd nod, knowing it was true, not just the skill, but the resilience, the quiet strength that had carried us through years of pain. But the past has a way of creeping back, uninvited. It came knocking one crisp November afternoon, a year and a half after the wedding. I was in my studio, pinning fabric to a mannequin, when Mom called from downstairs, her voice tight. "Jane, you've got visitors." I frowned, wiping my hands on my jeans, and headed to the living room. There they stood, my father, Margaret, and Claire, like figures from a nightmare I'd thought I'd left behind. My father, grayer now, his suit ill-fitting, offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Margaret, her blonde hair pulled tight, wore a navy dress that screamed money but lacked grace, her lips pursed in a thin line. Claire, in a black coat that hid her sharp angles, stood slightly behind them, her emerald eyes darting around the room, taking in the hardwood floors, the art on the walls, the life I'd built without them. They weren't remorseful, their faces smooth with entitlement, acting as if the years of cruelty, the day they'd begged for Mom's life and been kicked out, had been a minor misunderstanding. "Jane, sweetheart," my father said, his voice warm as if we'd parted over a coffee last week. "Look at you, all grown up and successful. We're so proud of you." My stomach churned, a mix of anger and disbelief surging through me. I stood in the doorway, my arms crossed, my heart pounding. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice steady despite the tremor I felt inside. Margaret stepped forward, her smile forced, her perfume cloying. "We wanted to see you, dear. You've done so well for yourself. This house, your career, it's all so impressive." Claire stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the floor, but I saw her jaw tighten, her hands fidgeting with her coat. I remembered her laughter at Annalise's wedding, her voice sharp as she'd mocked me. "You're nothing, Jane." I remembered her bragging at Atelier Vivienne, weeks before the wedding, about being on the bridal team, invited to the event, while I was just a seamstress who'd never belong. I remembered the day I'd stood on their doorstep at 16, begging for help with Mom's treatments, my voice breaking as Claire sneered, "Crawl back to your hole," and Margaret slammed the door. My father had stood there, silent, his eyes avoiding mine, as if I were a stranger. And now they were here, acting like none of it had happened, like their cruelty was a footnote they'd forgotten. "What do you want?" I said, my voice sharper now, cutting through their false warmth. My father cleared his throat, his smile faltering. "Well, Jane, we thought since you're doing so well at Atelier Vivian, maybe you could help Claire out. She's been working hard, but a promotion would really set her up. You're in charge now, aren't you?" Claire's eyes flicked up, meeting mine for the first time, and I saw it. Not remorse, not shame, but expectation, as if I owed her something. The audacity of it lit a fire in me, memories flooding back. Claire tearing my sketches as a child, her laughter echoing through our old neighborhood, her voice in the atelier's workroom, spreading rumors that I was incompetent, her triumph in the wedding foyer, mocking my shoes, my dress, my existence. And now, after all that, she stood in my home, waiting for me to lift her up. Margaret chimed in, her voice saccharine. "It's only fair, Jane. You've had your moment. Claire deserves a chance to shine, too. Family helps family, doesn't it?" The word family hit me like a slap. I thought of Mom, her frail hands clutching mine in hospital rooms, her voice steady despite her pain. I thought of the nights we'd gone hungry, the years we'd scraped by, while my father built a new life with Margaret and Claire, their laughter a wall we could never breach. I thought of the day I'd begged for Mom's life, my tears falling on their doorstep, and how they'd turn me away, Claire's sneer a brand on my heart. And now they dared to call us family? I looked at them, my anger steadying into resolve. "You had your chance to be family," I said, my voice calm but firm, each word deliberate. "You chose otherwise. You mocked me, kicked me out, turned your backs when I needed you most. And now you're here, acting like it never happened, asking for favors? You don't get to do that." My father's face reddened, his smile gone. "Jane, that's not fair. We're trying to make things right." "Make things right?" I cut him off, my voice rising, years of pain spilling over. "You let your wife and daughter bully me and Mom for years. You stood by while they drove us out of our home. I begged you for help when Mom was dying, and you shut the door in my face. Claire bragged about her invitations, her designs, while I was fighting to keep Mom alive. You don't get to walk in here and pretend you're proud." Claire flinched, her hands balling into fists, but she said nothing. Margaret's lips thinned, her eyes narrowing. "You're being dramatic, Jane. We're here to support you. Claire's talented and you know it. A little help won't hurt you." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that startled even me. "Support me? You've never supported me. You mocked me when I was nothing, and now that I'm something, you want a piece of it. Claire's talented? Let her prove it, like I did. I don't owe you anything." I turned to Mom, who stood in the kitchen doorway, her eyes blazing with a strength I'd always admired. She'd heard every word, her face a mix of pride and fury. "Mom," I said, my voice softening, "handle this." She nodded, stepping forward, her presence commanding despite her slight frame. "You heard my daughter," she said, her voice steel. "Get out. You're not welcome here." My father opened his mouth, but Mom raised a hand, silencing him. "You abandoned us, let your new family torment us, and now you come crawling back? No. Leave and don't come back." Margaret huffed, grabbing Claire's arm, but Claire pulled away, her eyes locked on mine, a mix of anger and something else, jealousy, maybe, or defeat. They turned, my father muttering something under his breath, and Mom followed them to the door, her steps firm. I heard the door slam, their voices fading, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Mom returned, her arms wrapping around me, her warmth grounding me. "I'm proud of you, Jane," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've built something beautiful, and I can't touch it." I hugged her back, tears pricking my eyes, but they were tears of release, not pain. The weight of their cruelty, their rejection, lifted, leaving only the life I'd built, the dreams I'd made real. That evening, I returned to my studio, the city's hum filtering through the windows. I picked up my pencil, sketching a new gown, bold, unapologetic, a reflection of the woman I'd become. My sketchbooks, once heavy with hidden dreams, were now my legacy, their pages a canvas for a future I'd claimed. Claire, Margaret, my father. They were shadows, fading against the light of my triumph. I am still a dreamer, but I, Jane Ellis, can now bring my dreams to life.